I still remember a moment that never really leaves a parent's memory. A child sitting right in front of something small enough to be harmless, but big enough, in their mind, to feel like a wall. A worksheet, a buttoned up shirt, a simple task that should take minutes, and then it comes. I can't do it. Not shouted, not dramatic, just quiet. Almost like a conclusion they've already accepted about themselves. Now, here's the part most adults miss. That sentence is rarely about the task in front of them. It's about what the task feels like inside them. It is emotion wearing the mask of logic. Over the years, I've noticed something consistent. The moment a child says, I can't do it, most parents instinctively jump into one of two directions. They either rush in and take over, fast, efficient, problem solved, or they tighten their voice and push harder, as if pressure can replace confidence. And strangely enough, both responses often make the same outcome worse. Because what the child is really learning in that moment is not how to complete the task, but how to respond to difficulty itself. What looks like refusal is often hesitation wrapped in fear. What sounds like stubbornness is often uncertainty dressed as confidence. And what feels like laziness is usually a child standing at the edge of frustration without the tools to cross it. Today, I want us to sit with that phrase a little longer than we usually do, because once you understand what is happening underneath it, your response changes everything. When a child says, I can't do it, the mistake many adults make is assuming the sentence is literal. But in developmental psychology, language at that age is rarely just language, it is emotional shorthand. What the child is often communicating falls into three hidden categories. First, there is cognitive overload. The task in front of them has too many steps, too many unknowns, or too many moving parts. The brain of a child, especially in early and middle childhood, is still developing executive function, meaning planning, sequencing, and working memory are not fully stable yet. So when they say, I can't, what they often mean is, I can't hold all of this in my head at once. Second, there is emotional flooding. This is where frustration rises faster than problem-solving ability. The child feels tension, discomfort, maybe even embarrassment, and their system switches into avoidance. Not because they are incapable, but because their emotional regulation system is still immature. In that moment, quitting feels safer than trying. Third, and this is the one many parents miss completely, is identity-based fear. The child is not just asking, can I do this task? They are silently asking, what does it say about me if I fail? If previous experiences have linked mistakes with criticism, shame, or comparison, then I can't do it becomes a protective statement. It is safer to declare inability than to risk confirming a feared identity, like I'm not smart or I always get things wrong. This is why arguing with the statement rarely works. If you respond with, yes, you can, without addressing the underlying cause, you are speaking to the surface, while the real problem sits underneath. And here is where it becomes interesting. Children are not resistant to effort itself. They are resistant to the emotional experience that comes with effort, when they do not yet trust their ability to survive failure. So, in reality, I can't do it is less of a refusal and more of a signal. It is a request for structure, emotional safety, and guided clarity, even if the child doesn't know how to ask for those things directly. When parents respond to, I can't do it, the first instinct usually comes from urgency. The thinking is simple: fix it quickly so the child moves on. But in that urgency, two very common patterns appear, and both quietly shape how the child handles difficulty long term. The first pattern is over-rescuing. This is when the parent immediately steps in, takes the pencil, ties the shoelace, or completes the assignment, just to help things move faster. On the surface, it looks supportive, but psychologically, it removes the child from the learning process entirely. The child doesn't just lose the chance to solve the problem, they lose the chance to tolerate the discomfort that comes with trying. Over time, the brain begins to learn a subtle rule. If something feels hard, someone else will step in. That is not laziness being created, it is dependency being reinforced through repetition. The child becomes quicker to declare inability because inability has been rewarded with relief. The second pattern is the opposite extreme: pressure. This is where frustration from the parent leaks into the interaction. Phrases like, just do it, stop saying that, or it's not hard start to appear. Sometimes it is not even words. Tone alone carries the message. The child hears impatience, and what gets reinforced is not confidence, but shame. Now the internal rule shifts again. If I struggle, I will be judged. And once shame enters the equation, avoidance becomes self protection. The child is no longer just avoiding the task, they are avoiding the emotional experience tied to the task. What makes this tricky is that both approaches come from care. One comes from wanting to help, the other from wanting to correct. But both skip the same critical step: teaching the child how to sit inside difficulty without escaping it. And this is where the real developmental gap sets. Children are not born knowing how to persist through frustration. That skill is built slowly, through repeated experiences where difficulty is not immediately removed or punished, but instead broken down and made manageable. So the real issue is not the task in front of the child, it is the emotional framework surrounding the task, and how quickly adults either eliminate it or amplify it. What sits underneath "I can't do it" more deeply than technique or instruction is something far more sensitive: the child's relationship with failure. At a certain stage of development, children stop seeing tasks as neutral. They start attaching meaning to outcomes. A wrong answer is no longer just a mistake, it becomes a statement about ability. This is where identity quietly begins to form. A child who repeatedly experiences correction without emotional safety may begin to internalize a simple but powerful belief: if I fail, it means I am not good. And once that belief takes root, effort itself becomes threatening, because effort increases the risk of failure being confirmed. This is where the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth oriented mindset becomes visible in real life, not theory. In a fixed pattern, difficulty is interpreted as evidence of limitation. In a growth pattern, difficulty is interpreted as information. But children don't naturally default to either. They develop one based on the emotional climate around their struggles. Comparison plays a major role here. When a child is regularly measured against siblings, classmates, or even subtle parental expectations, they begin to see performance as a ranking system rather than a learning process. And in ranking systems, there are only two outcomes: superior or inferior, no middle ground for development. So when the child says, "I can't do it," it is often not about the task at all. It is a preemptive exit from a situation where they anticipate emotional discomfort. In their internal logic, stopping early feels safer than trying and potentially proving something painful about themselves. This is also why reassurance alone often fails. Saying "you are smart" does not address the fear underneath, because the child is not doubting intelligence in general. They are doubting their ability to succeed in this specific moment without losing self-worth if they fail. What they actually need is not identity labels, but a different experience of difficulty. One where struggle is present, but not dangerous. Where mistakes exist, but do not carry emotional punishment. Where effort is observed, not rushed or judged. Until that shift happens, "I can't do it" will continue to function as a psychological safety valve, not a statement of truth. When you strip everything back, "I can't do it" is rarely about ability. It is about how a child has learned to survive difficulty in the moment. And that is the key shift parents often miss. Because if the response is either rescue or pressure, the child learns that difficulty must be escaped or feared. But if the response is structured support, calm, steady, and broken into small enough steps, something different begins to happen. The task stops being a wall and starts becoming a path. One of the most effective approaches is what I like to call guided reduction. Not doing the task for the child and not leaving them alone in overwhelm, but shrinking the problem until it becomes psychologically manageable. Show me the first step instead of just do it. That small shift changes everything because it moves the child from emotional shutdown into action. And something subtle happens in that moment. Once the child completes even the smallest step, their brain receives evidence that effort does not automatically lead to failure. That evidence is more powerful than reassurance, praise, or correction. It is lived experience. Over time, repetition does the real work. The child begins to internalize a different voice. Not, I can't do it, but I don't know yet, but I can try the first part. That change is not dramatic on day one. It builds slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. The goal was never to eliminate struggle. Struggle is part of learning. The goal is to remove the fear around struggle so that effort becomes something the child can stay inside without shutting down. If you've ever heard a child say, I can't do it, I'd be interested to know what usually happens next in your home. I might personally respond to your comment, so feel free to share your experience. If this helped you understand your child a little differently today, like, share, and subscribe.